I'm a 25-year-old poker player living in San Diego, California. And the next step in my life is to buy a house. There is only one problem.
Recent numbers from the National Association of Realtors found that home prices are still hitting record highs.
But if you've scrolled through Zillow lately, you'll notice that home prices are still high.
I don't want to leave California, man. I could probably go buy a property in Las Vegas or somewhere else for a lot cheaper, but I love California way too much. I love the weather here in San Diego. I love the poker here in San Diego. I have no intentions of leaving anytime soon. All right, so I am on Zillow right now. We're gonna take a look at a couple prices of some homes here. The problem is I live in San Diego, California, and house prices are extremely expensive in California in general, and San Diego, California is even more tax. Let's just see. We need at least 2 bedrooms. We need at least 1 bathroom, obviously. Let's make the price something relatively reasonable here. Like we're not gonna be cashing out for 2 million or anything. So let's just put it cap at 1.5. Right here, we got a property, a condo in Little Italy. It's a 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom, $1.125 million. So the down payment on that is gonna be somewhere in the ballpark of like 275 or so. 1 million, this is gonna be a $250,000 down payment, somewhere in that ballpark. I mean, this is a pretty nice house or a nice home for 800K. So yeah, 200K. 200K will be the goal. Got a little spot in Bankers Hill. Obviously, making $200,000 playing poker isn't gonna happen overnight. Yeah, we're gonna set the goal for this challenge to be able to make $200,000. This year I'm gonna be grinding not just to play poker, but also for this house and also for this end goal. So we are gonna be striving to make life a lot better with owning a property, being financially responsible and seeing what we can do. Let's do it. Game that I'm gonna be playing today is a 5, 10, 20 match the stat game. So usually people are gonna start out with around $3,000 or so, but the stacks are going to get quite deep by the end of the night. I'm quite sure multiple players will have 5 figures in their stack, so it is no small game by any means, but it is quite a significant amount smaller than the Bally stream that you guys have been watching. So it is something I'm a little bit more comfortable playing, a little bit more within my bankroll per se, in terms of just being financially responsible. And I think what better way to kick off the challenge of trying to buy a house and be financially responsible than to be financially responsible with my bankroll. So here we are headed to Jamul, playing some 5, 10, 20. Alright, so we've played a few small pots at this point, but nothing too major. That is when we get involved in our first real hand of the stream. Caleb opens the action up to $50 from the hijack, and both George and Richard, who are next to act, make the call. We peel pocket tens in the small blind, definitely going to be bumping things up here. I make it $325, and the action gets back over to Caleb. Caleb thinks for a while and decides to 4-bet to $1,075, and action quickly folds back over to me. Caleb is pretty aggressive. I've played with him a decent amount up until this point and know that he's certainly capable of having plenty of 4-bet bluffs in this spot. It's pretty awkward to just call here out of position with these stack sizes though. So I think it's the best option essentially is just to go all in at this point. I do end up sending it for a little under $3,000, and we get a snap fold from Caleb, who was trying to make a play with the 7 deuce offsuit for the bounty. Always nice to scoop up some chips uncontested. About an orbit later, the table fills up and we get involved in another sizable pot. Michael opens under the gun to 50 and Sean calls from the $10 blind. We look down at ace-king offsuit in the 3rd blind and bump things up to $275. Michael quickly folds, but Sean does end up calling, so we're gonna go heads up to a flop here. Flop comes out 8-5-2 with 2 hearts, and when he checks it over to us, I just decide to check this back and see if we can improve on the turn or the river. And improve we do. The turn comes the king of spades. Now Sean checks it over to us again At this point, we're obviously going to be betting. I decided to bet for 275 with intentions of jamming most river cards. He does something very unexpected though. He check raises to 575. I'm never folding. He doesn't have a ton of money behind. So I think the obvious play is just to go all in and get him to commit with draws. But I actually decided to just call here and pretty much commit myself to snap calling any river no matter what comes out. The river comes the queen of spades. He goes all in for 760 as expected, and I just snapped this off. Unfortunately, he did have pocket twos here. He's going to take down this $3,300 pot, and we're going to be forced to add on some chips. In the next hand of note, George opens things up from the cutoff to 50, and Sean calls in the small blind. We look down at a very playable ace-8 suited in the $10 blind and decide to bump things up to 300. George makes the call, but Sean gets out of the way, so we go heads up to a flop of Jack-8-2 with 2 hearts and a club. Pretty good flop for us, all things considered, so I start with a $260 c-bet, and George obliges with the price and makes the call. The turn comes the 9 of diamonds. This is just a pretty bad card. Hands like Queen 10 suited are now a straight. Hands like 10-9 suited are beating us as well. Not a card I'm going to be betting that often. I decide to check this over and see what George wants to do. He does decide to check it back, so we are going to head to a river, and the river comes another offsuit 9. I do think our hand at this point can still get value from worse after he does check back the turn. There's plenty of worse 8x that he could have, as well as some pocket pairs like 7s or 6s. You get the point. Those hands aren't going to really call a big bet though, so I do decide to bet really small here. I make it $130, which is about 10% of the pot. He does decide to flick in the call, and we end up losing to King Jack suited. Another great reason to put out the blocker bet here is so we lose a lot less when he has a hand exactly like this. If we check it over, I'm certain we're going to face a much larger bet than $130, so it feels good to lose the minimum here on the river. Action folds to us on the button, and we open King 5 of spades to $50. Patrick 3-bets to $220 from the small blind, and Ricky decides to cold call from the $10 blind, and action gets back over to me. Look, I didn't drive all the way out to Jamul to fold suited kings to 3-bets in position. I'm going to come along for the ride here with a call and see if we can suck out on what looks to be 2 pretty big hands. The flop comes out ace, deuce 3 with 2 spades. An absolute dream flop for me. They both check it over to me, and I'm going to start pumping some money into this pot here. I decide on a sizing of $200, and both of them make the call. The turn comes the Jack of diamonds, so I guess we're not going to get the luxury of immediately getting there like we normally do. But when it checks to me again, I think it is fine to bet. But Patrick is a pretty tricky player, and he is going to arrive on the turn with a lot of very strong hands that can check raise. It's going to put my specific hand into a pretty miserable spot if that happens, so I do decide to check this back even with this much equity here. The river comes the 8 of spades, and it checks over to me again. Kind of bummed no one wanted to bet out, but I'm going to go for a pretty healthy bet here, targeting any ace that either player could have in this spot. I decide on a sizing of $1,100, but both players do end up folding. Neither of them had an ace though, so not a whole lot they could do when I bet for this size on the river. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first PLO double board bomb pot hand that I've ever covered on this channel. But in the Wednesday stream game, we do play one every single half hour or so. We have Queen 10, 9, 6, and we're somewhere in the middle of all the players. We flop pretty big with top 2 pair on the top board and an open-ended straight draw to the nuts on the other. Look, I'm no PLO expert or anything, but that seems pretty good to me, so I decide to bet 75 into the middle. Patrick calls and action gets over to Ricky on the button, and he decides to raise to 200. Like I said, my hand is pretty good, but it's not amazing. I'm not going anywhere yet. I make the call, and so does Patrick. The turn is an actual fucking orgasm. We just get there immediately on both boards. Literally could not have asked for a better turn on either board. We now have the nut straight on the bottom and a boat on the top. I don't really understand PLO that well, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure leading here is going to be valid. But given that we are pretty deep, the only way I'll be able to get all the chips in the middle is by going for a check raise. So I do decide to set the trap here and check. Action gets back over to Ricky, and he decides to pot it. Obviously an absolute dream situation for us. I do my best to Hollywood for a few seconds before repotting it here. Patrick folds, but Ricky decides to ship the rest of his stack in and play for it all. Obviously, we have no decision. We snap call, and we're headed to the river in a $10,000 pot. Both rivers totally brick off. We are going to scoop this massive pot up. Biggest pot of the night so far. Literally a complete 180 on the night and our session overall. We were down headed into this hand, but now we're in the green by a long shot. I can already smell the house. I can smell the keys in front of me. Get the beers ready, baby. Let's party. We're getting to the end of the night now, and this is going to be the last major pot of the stream. Caleb opens to 50 from the low jack, and Dave calls in the hijack. We look down at the Cowboys in the small blind and bump it up to $300. Caleb calls, but Dave gets out of the way. The flop comes Jack, Jack 3 rainbow, and on this board, we're just going to start looking to pile in chips right away. I start off with a nice little $200 c-bet, and Caleb makes a quick call, so we're going to head to the turn. Turn is a brick, it's the 6 of spades, and I see no reason to slow down. I bet for 600, and Caleb makes the call again. The river is another big brick. It is the 5 of clubs, and at this point, obviously, Caleb could easily just have a jack here. He could easily have a pocket pair that's a full house, but at the end of the day, there's just way too many hands to get value from. If he has a jack, congratulations, he gets the double up. But if he doesn't, we're pretty much always having the best hand. So I jam for his remaining $1,000 or so, and he does end up making the hero call with ace king offsuit. So we are going to win this nice pot up as the night comes to an end. We just wrapped up the session. It is like 1 o'clock in the morning right now. I was into the game for 7,500. I ended to be out of the game for 9,600. So profit of 2.1K, which is like roughly a 1% dent in what we need to get done. Obviously, it's no small chunk of change. It's still a decent win. But yeah, a little bit disappointing in a sense that I was up a lot more before this. But yeah, small chunk here. Let's go. All right, so we just made it back to the crib. It is 3 a.m. right now. Just got some food. But to recap the session and recap our goal for this series to get to that down payment, we won $2.1 thousand, which is pretty good profit for the first session for the challenge. I'm pretty excited to start off in the green. Obviously starting off in the red, getting negative to get to that down payment is obviously not going to be good. But we've ticked off roughly 1% of our $200,000 goal to get to that down payment. Pretty excited about that. You know, we could have ticked off about 3%, you know, if we left at our peak, but we had a couple rough hands post stream, specifically in PLO double board bomb pots. Not much I could have done about it, but overall, I feel extremely happy about how I played today, which is all that matters. Welcome to the challenge. We're gonna hit that $200,000 goal by the end of 2026. Let's get it. Let's go buy a house, baby.